Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a Time Capsule episode of The Say Report. I'm your host, Draven Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Yes, Sejan Sarah Crow.
I mean, I don't know. It says I'm actually Devin Decker. I'm not gonna be beholden to that. It's actually a pretty big deal that I don't think Draven is the okay. So here is the setup for everything. It's a time capsule episode. We're recording this on October 17th, and for eagle-eared listeners, on October 16th, Sejan revealed we recorded our very special episode celebrating the 30th anniversary of The Crow starring Brandon Lee. And what we decided to do for this time capsule episode is talk all about the 2024 remake, I hope you heard the air quotes, of The Crow, starring Billy Skarsgård and FKA Keys and freaking Danny Houston, and it's this incredible remake of The Crow that we watched. So that's what this episode is. This time
FKA Twigs, isn't it? What do you mean?
Oh, it is Twigs. I'm sorry. Twigs and Keys, I get conflagrated in my mind. I wish I were kidding about that. She's a keyboardist, you see. But yeah, so we're here to talk about the remake. The remake that, as of this recording, made $9.27 million. And that's it.
Off of a much bigger budget than that.
Yes,
so.
I was unable to find the budget, but I find it hard to believe that this film that looked streets ahead of the 4:30 movie. Like, I'm not trying to be mean to Kevin Smith. It's just, in the past couple of weeks, real time, right? I don't know when this is going to be released, but in the last couple of weeks, real time, we have watched two films, Hellboy the Crooked Man and The Crow Reborn. We're going to call it The Crow Reborn. That was its working title for a while. And then it's an easy way to differentiate between the two movies at this point. And both of those films, like, really, Hellboy was pulled from theaters in America and released straight to streaming, as was the 4:30 movie. And at least The Crow Reborn was released in theaters August 23rd. It was the 8th movie in the country, even though it only made $4.33 million that weekend, which is fairly indicative of, what movies are doing in America right now. That is the takeaway that I would recommend from that. But like this film and Hellboy the Crooked Man, they both looked like for real Hollywood films.
Well, that's because they weren't self-financed, Dev.
Right, but Kevin Smith has made for real Hollywood films too. You'd think that, like, he'd understand. I don't know. It's just, and the 4:30 movie again was a straight two.
But again, he self-finances his films.
Okay, I guess that's a good point. And just, I would have expected these films to look on the same level as that, and I'm really happy that they didn't, is I guess all I'm trying to say. But I'm not trying to tear them down. It's just, when you hear people crow about The Crow Reborn and act like it is the worst thing to have ever happened in our world, you expect to watch the movie and it be like hard on the eyes. This was a very pretty movie. I'm not ashamed to say that.
No, I think this is something that we did also say about Hellboy, and I think that's an apt comparison there. As much as I don't understand the comparison to Smith, but I will give you the Hellboy comparison for sure for a few reasons that we're going to talk about, including behind the scenes stuff. But there's just there is a style, right? Like there is a style to this film, right? That it really embraces and celebrates. I will say this. The reason that I think this movie doesn't land perfectly is because it doesn't enjoy itself enough. Like, it makes choices, for sure it makes choices, but rarely does it then like embrace those choices. Like there's maybe one or two big things that I can visually recall currently. I agree with you that it's a pretty movie, but when I think about actual visual things from this film, there's only a couple of things I can recall, and I literally just watched this movie again for like 20 minutes ago. So that says something, right? I think there's some things that, like, they make these really good, really interesting, really strong choices, but then they don't quite commit all the way in one direction or another, you know? And like, and I think that that really makes this movie not hard to watch, nowhere near that, but it makes it so that this movie doesn't have as much sticking power, right? So like, to go from that though, to go from that concept, that idea, that I feel like, man, this movie, like, there's so much I really enjoy, but I can see where you would want more. To go from that to hearing people talk about how this is like the worst thing to happen to cinema is like, oh, fucking wild.
It's insane.
This is the next Morbius. Is like, it was like some of the conversation out there right now, which is like, I feel very unfair. I know Devin has different opinions about Morbius, so probably that's a different conversation there. But like, I will say, speaking like a sane person, that I don't think that's a fair comparison to make.
Look, if they re-release The Crow in 6 months in theaters and it doesn't do well a second time, I would not complain about it. That's what I'm gonna say. No, it's beautiful in the way of like Mr. Jones by the Counting Crows. Oh my fucking god! I didn't even think about that connection. Oh, I'm an asshole. But like all of the beautiful colors that are very, very meaningful. Red and blue and black and gray. Like this film is beautiful, but it is working with a very muted color palette. Like one of the things that I'm specifically talking about is, I guess, like Limbo. I love the design of Limbo. I guess that's what you'd consider that space between. First of all, spoilers for The Crow Reborn, The Crow 2024. We're not pulling punches here. I would recommend watching it. It is available digital to rent or buy from like Amazon, or any of the shops have it. I don't know the price for it because I had access to it through other means.
$20 currently.
$20. Excellent. And that's just, I have a friend who lent me a copy of it, and thank you very much to that friend. I do understand the wary legality of it, so he will remain nameless. But afterwards, after watching this film, I'm like, I would have paid to watch this movie. It's just one of those situations where somebody let me borrow it, right? And there's a good chance that I might purchase this. There's a good chance I might make The Crow my identity as a person who saw the 1994 movie, let's say 48 hours ago, and it's less than that. It's like 35 hours ago. And the 2024 movie, let's see, 8 hours ago. Like that is my timeline. My favorite thing about these two Crow episodes is that so rarely am I at the disadvantage in terms of watching the film multiple times, but both of these episodes, Siegen has been in the catbird seat because he saw The Crow, the original Crow, I don't know how many times, but certainly more than my one time. And I know for a fact that he watched The Crow 2024 twice for this recording.
And so, like, part of me not wanting to really bring that up, as we had done our previous recordings and things like that, was just like, I had some feelings about this version of this story compared to the other one that I think would have muddied the waters, because like, to remind people in case this thing comes out in God knows how long, but like, we loved The Crow. Like, yeah, no. I mean, we have a lot of love for The Crow. We did, though, point out quite a few things that are quite ridiculous in it, right?
Yep, and there are no shortage of ridiculous things in this film either. Well,
sure, and there are, but I will say this. It is a much more ridiculous, but, like, within the logic of the movie, not so much. Whereas, like, there are things that happen in the 94 one where it's just like, we have not been prepared for this to be in this movie.
Yes, he's not wrong. If you haven't listened to the very special episode on The Crow, go back. It's our 69th very special episode. Nice. But yeah, like it is, we talk about things that exist in that movie. My biggest one is the timeline and Albrecht, and the fact that, like, he should have been a detective and then lost his shield in the year that passes. But this movie, it doesn't even give you, he dies and comes back to life like that, and I love it. It is fantastic.
There's no like year that passes and stuff. I will say there is a little bit of a timeline kind of bullshitty thing in this one that gets me. in the opening, when they're in the first like 20 minutes when they're trying to do the backstory, it's got a phenomenal first act that actually goes on much longer than we've ever gotten in a Crow movie before. Because as much as Devin's right, he dies and then comes right back as the Crow and like gets to it. That's really good in pacing. The other good thing in pacing that this movie does is actually take its time before that. So we get a lot of really good feelings for what their relationship is like and why he's able to come back as the Crow.
So I paused the film with 35 minutes into it. I paused the movie just like because something had fallen. So I wanted to pause the movie, make sure I got myself recollected. And I'm like, holy shit, 35 minutes have gone by? In the original Crow, he's already killed 3 people. Like that is the restraint in this film.
But in the timeline of this one, you've got to pay attention to the fact that they kidnapped that girl. Right, that's the opening of this movie. Is her friend gets kidnapped, Sadie.
Zadie, then, with a Z.
Yeah, and then they cut to this whole story of Shelley getting away, and then she gets herself arrested in order to help herself gets to safety.
So good.
She gets,
love it. Sorry.
She gets somehow at some point she gets somehow sentenced to this like rehab facility, or somehow she ends up at this rehab facility where Eric has been. They develop this whole relationship. Then we cut back to the night that Sadie was kidnapped again. Zadie was kidnapped again. Like the amount of time that passed. Then to go back to Zadie in the exact same outfit, from what we could tell, it only being moments after she was kidnapped from her own apartment.
Right.
I was like, are we supposed to believe that all just happened in a couple of hours? Because like she is straight up now in a rehab facility, and we watched her we've watched the entire thing happen of her getting arrested and all that. There's no way this has been weeks, right? But no, it's supposed to be just that same night.
No, I don't think it's... I mean, I think that there's some Rashomon storytelling. I think there's a little bit of playing with the timeline of it. I think Zadie dies that same night that she is kidnapped by Marion.
Of course she does.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then I think that, everything that happens
I think
with
they fucked up
Shelley...
and they should have put that scene earlier. They were trying to do it for the pacing of the feels, forgetting what the pacing of the story actually asked for.
But I also think that we said so much about the first movie that like it trusts its audience. I think that they're trusting the audience to understand that like this is all stuff that happened that same night that Shelley was arrested.
But to what end?
Yeah.
But to what end? Like why did it need to be out of time? You know what I mean? Like what is the benefit to it being out of time?
I mean, it's artistic. I don't know. I agree that there's no thing, but
artistic.
I don't know.
No, I think we have to be fair that there are things about this movie that are rough. And I think that's the problem with the criticism cycle that all of these movies get, right? And have been getting for years. It's never been this idea that, hey, people are completely wrong about this movie. What is wrong with them? There are things about this movie that are rough that people are pulling out of context or blowing up and then snowballing into different problems and completely mutating into bigger problems. But it's always started from a place of there is definitely something in this that is off, that is weird, that doesn't work for me, right? And that's why it's so dangerous, is because it's hard to argue to a point, right? At some point people are ridiculous and you can definitely shut them down, but like when you get down to it, there are things in this movie that are weird and I think wrong, and also like some silly ass choices. But just because I think they're silly doesn't necessarily mean they don't work. Doesn't mean they don't work for somebody else, especially, right? Like I love his Fight Club jacket. The entire fucking time that he's running around. Yeah.
I loved that jacket. That jacket was like, that costumer had to have been proud of like, we got the perfect jacket for Eric. And I'm going to refer to them as Eric and Shelley because I feel like I should get my theory about this film out there fairly early. And that is the fact that like, this is Eric and Shelley, but resurrected. Their souls have come back to Earth to be together again after the events of the first film. So as much as it's like a remake or a rebirth, it is because their souls have been sent back to Earth so that they can live their life together. Now that fucking sucks for Shelley, because she is born to one of the most selfish maternal figures that I think we've ever seen in cinema. The fact that she essentially sold her daughter's soul so that she could have like fame, riches, and potentially eternal life. The rewards that were given to Shelley's mom are never like given as black and white as they could or should be for us to fully understand the weight and severity of her choice. But I do believe, because he is never called Eric Draven and she is never called Shelley Webster. They are just Eric and Shelley. And now I bring that up because the only Crow film that had Eric Draven in it was The Crow from 1994. Now, The Crow Stairway to Heaven, the television series, starring Mark Dacascos, by the way, Jimmy Lee from Double Dragon, which I feel like we just dropped the ball on that one. But again, I didn't want to do the research. I did a little bit more research on this one because after watching this movie, it's pretty clear that it is not a remake of the 1994 film. And
and to that point, behind the scenes, we do have the original creator of The Crow, right?
Yeah.
There's just some interesting lineage there. Like this is a story still being told by James O'Barr, and like I think it really retains a lot of what he wanted the original story to be, and I think evolves some of it to a much more mature place. Like, I still think there's a lot of stuff going on in this with the ideas of handling grief and white knighting and a whole bunch of other shit like that. And like, as we talked about last time, this idea that like, this is a story that was developed in the mind of an 18-year-old boy that had just lost the love of his life and decided to run off and join the military, and like thought that maybe just like a little bit of murder and mayhem might actually get him over that. And he learned the hard way that it didn't, and it's something that he like talks about frequently. And like, this movie feels like a product of a guy that has lived that life and has grown up from it, right? Much like the one in 94 felt like the product of a guy that was still in it. Yeah. I think that they're both fantastic versions of what James O'Barr was trying to do with both of these stories.
Yeah, I agree. That is, I mean, and that's interesting because like we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of The Crow in a very special episode, and now this film that was released 30 years later, and it's very rare that we get such a glimpse into the mental state of the creator of a property. And but like he has this, like this is a person who, James O'Barr, the money he got from the original Crow film, he ended up donating the bulk of it to charity, right? Like he bought something for his mom, he got himself a new car, and then the rest of the money he donated to charity. And he kept that a secret for like 28 years. And when it was finally revealed, and I believe it was when they were workshopping and starting pre-production on the film that we're talking about now, he's like, I kept it a secret because it's not charity if you try to get credit for it. But like, he was so hurt by the loss of the friend he made in the making of that film, Brandon Lee, that he felt that any of the money he earned from the 1994 movie was blood money. And like, it felt wrong to spend it on himself, on selfish things. And you look at The Crow and how like there is that thing of like the selfishness of being a good person and not devoting this gift you've been given by the cosmos solely to revenge is kind of The Crow's weakness, right? You need to divorce yourself from your humanity so that you can complete your revenge mission and then save the soul of yourself and your lost love. So much that
I mean, I kind of felt this when we were watching the 94 one, but we didn't really talk about it. But I definitely felt it in this one with all of the backstory that we get. There is such a Romeo and Juliet tragedy, romance like spine to this story that I never really quite like appreciated before we watched them for these recordings. Like, the ways in which it uses, and you know, it's real saccharine, it's real tropey, but the ways in which this whole idea that he gives up everything for love, right? Like, and I think back to just kind of the ways in which we embraced certain over the top storytelling in the 90s, like it makes total sense, right? That like there's this heartthrob rock star that's willing to give up his very soul to save the woman that he loves, or at least revenge her, right? Is like it's this phenomenal like real like sappy, like gets to my heart and soul type of story. Like yeah, it's tropey as hell, and it's almost Shakespearean in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. And that was also think about the 18-year-old who initially wrote the story. And like, that is, I mean, I can speak only for us and our experiences, but like in your teen years is when you are the most susceptible to the love stories that Shakespeare
To be clear,
wrote.
I'm pretty sure by the time James Barr actually wrote The Crow, it was years later. I was saying in his teen years he was developed, because this was all of from a tragedy that happened when he was a teen.
Yes.
So like I'm sure that these were stories that were playing in his head, and it's just that's exactly it though, right? Is that this feels like the opinions and the feelings and the attitude of that teen, like dealing with this grief that they're dealing with, and this anger that they're dealing with, and all of that, and filtered through the mind of. And in the 90s it was a guy that was a few years away from it. Now we're talking decades away from it. Like it is a really interesting thing to look into.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, I love it. But yeah, my big theory is that this is not the same Eric. Clearly it's not, because it's set in 2024 as opposed to being set in 1994, right? Like it is, time moves forward. But also, I mean, this movie, the first act of this film is, I'm going to say something here, and I'm sorry to Sejin, and I'm sorry to anyone else, but I feel like it's what people expected from Fale Adu. I thought, like, because it feels so much like that. They're both in this rehabilitation, sort of mental facility where they're getting help, and they find each other, and they escape together. But, like, it's not the Joker and Harley Quinn. So instead of going on a murderous rampage, they just get to embrace the love that they feel for each other.
Rehab romance is also a trope, though, right? Like you gotta realize that, like what's the Jennifer and Cooper one there, Bradley Cooper one there?
Silver Linings Playbook.
Silver Linings Playbook, right, is another one that I really think of in this vein. But yeah, you get these stories, right, about the rehab romance movie.
I'm not going to deny that they don't happen and they don't exist, but all I could think, as the member of the Say Report, who I don't think you'll ever see Joker 2, is just a statement that I will make. The fact that you've never seen Wonder Woman 84, I doubt you would give a minute of your time to Fale Adu. And Sejin, this is not me double dog.
It's getting real close. No, you got to realize that pendulum on Joker 2 is getting real close to starting to fall in the other direction for old Sejin. Because if people keep talking about it the way they keep talking about it, at some point curiosity is going to get the better of me, and I'm going to go in with a certain set of eyes. And so I'm just saying that it's not completely off the books.
All right, but I wasn't trying to like double dog dare you to go see it. Like, you'll never see it. That was not the intention,
Devin. Nor would that actually.
I know. I understand that you're not Marty McFly in the second or third Back to the Future movie.
You would double dog you would double dog dare me this week, and then next week we would record an episode and you go, did you watch it? And I'll go, nope, and that would be the end of the conversation.
That's 100%. I mean, that's probably still what's going to happen. Let's just be honest. Or you'll go see it and then we can have a real and then I'll have to go see it again to make sure that my thoughts are fresh. And oh man, we're spiraling. But all I could think as I was watching it was, this has to have been what people were expecting the Joker sequel to be, right?
Sure,
like this, hyper saccharine. I mean, yes, it's a couple of serial killers and murderers who are having this like saccharine sort of rehab romance, as Sejin, rightfully identified the trope. But like that never happens. It never gets to the level of enjoyment or comfort that this film is able to provide in like 2 scenes. Not even that, like 1 minute of them knowing each other, and it suddenly feels like, oh, they've known each other forever. And that is where part of my plot comes from, is like, because their souls have already engaged with each other again. And it sucks.
Well, I think this is probably also a good time for us to now turn our focus for a moment to Skarsgård and Twigs, right?
Yeah.
Because that only works because the two of them are magnificent.
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
just like they are
Yes.
perfectly cast in this film. Like and I mean like I would have expected nothing less from Bill Skarsgård, and I'll be honest, I don't know much about FKA Twigs. I don't know. I like this was my introduction. Like, and so watching this and watching the two of them have that, and having like there being this genuine hesitation at first, but not a block, not an obstacle, right? Too often, like we talk about the idea, like people don't just fall in love at first sight, right? Like that's just not what happens. And then screenwriters take that to mean, yeah, they have to have a fucking knockdown, drag out fight first, and it's like, no, there's something in between. It's possible for two people to realize they like each other within a few like times of being together. We just need that, right? We don't it doesn't need to be they hated each other at first, they loved each other, or they loved each other completely immediately. And like we get just enough build up in the first few moments of this movie. And like I think the movie also gets a little bit of a pass because we know this is the story we're here to see, right? There's some of that to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
we are here to see a guy that loses the woman he loves and goes on a revenge rampage. That is the Crow. That is why we want to be here. So like, yes, okay, give it to us. Yes, show us this. So there's a little bit of pacing like flexibility because of that, right? And so there's this movie balances it really, really nicely for me.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. It is. God, it's beautiful. I just freaking I loved this film. Like I fucking loved this movie. And then as also everybody's like, da, da, da. I mean, I'm gonna share. I put it in our stupid little chat that we talk and prepare things for. The film's first trailer. This is trivia from IMDb. The film's first trailer met with an overwhelmingly negative response. Alex Proyas, director of The Crow 94, immediately stated that this new version should never have been made. The Crow is not just a movie. Brandon Lee died making it, and it was finished as a testament to his lost brilliance and tragic loss. It is his legacy. That's how it should remain. After the film's release, Proyas posted screenshots of all the bad reviews and commented that box office is a bloodbath. I thought the remake was a cynical cash grab. Not much cash to grab, it seems. In response to Proyas' early criticism, star Bill Skarsgård suggested that he was entitled to his opinion, but also pointed out that the original film had already spawned 3 sequels in The Crow City of Angels, The Crow Salvation, and The Crow Wicked Prayer. See, that's an important part of what this film is in terms of looking at the current state of Hollywood. I think that if this film had just been another sequel to The Crow, it would have never met with the backlash that it was met with. I mean, the fact that like Alex Proyas comes out and says like this is stamping on the legacy of the first film, like completely ignoring that first film spawned a franchise, and the way that they dealt with the fact that, you know, it's a different Crow was by having Ash Corvin, Alex Corvus, and Jimmy Cuervo as the vessels that the Crow spirit inhabits after an unfair death. Like, yes, they stepped away from it, but there wasn't a single solitary Crow film. It did not stand as a monolith, and now 30 years later we're gonna knock that down to try to build our own monolith. Like, it's just such a weird look at it. And
I think part of that is the current atmosphere where everything is a remake or, you know, reboots and remakes and requels, right? Like everything is a something, and like so nothing can be a sequel now, right? The sequels just can't exist. It's no longer a sequel. It's a shot in the arm for the franchise. It's a reboot, and it's just like, no, it's a sequel, and it's like, yeah, but it's also a reboot. And it's like, can we not put that weight on at least one movie, please?
But I think that is the larger issue that's happening in Hollywood. Because if this was just a sequel, it would not have garnered, I think, the hatred that it did, right? If it was The Crow Reborn, right? And even if he was called Eric and she was called Shelley, but like clearly it's not Eric Draven and Shelley Webster. We never give them those surnames, right? They're living in a different world. They have different upbringings. They're not together at the beginning of it. We watch them fall in love. Like, it is a very unique story.
I think the problem is that if that, well, that is just a that is just something to aim for. That is a target for trolls to aim for right now, right? And I'm just going to call them that because that's just what it is.
What it is. Yeah,
because
no, it's fine.
anybody that truly doesn't like a movie, do you know what they actually do? They just don't engage.
They don't engage.
And I know that there are plenty of people out there that are like that. They're not interested in The Crow. They didn't go see The Crow. They don't talk about The Crow. They're not going to get into this conversation about The Crow. That's fine. The problem is the people that do want to get engaged in that conversation, and they are the fucking trolls of this whole thing. It's just the problem is that they would have found something, and so all they did was take aim at the fact that it was a remake, and then they took that to heart and and they started being like, you're stamping all over Brandon Lee's legacy. If it wasn't, if they didn't do that, if they did call it Crow Reborn, and if they renamed everybody, they still would have found some reason to shit all over this movie, because that's all anybody's doing right now. A movie gets announced before we even see a preview now, and people are lining up to talk about why it's going to be the worst thing they've ever seen. It is impossible to release a movie nowadays without that. Sometimes the movie's good enough to get past some of that shit, but like all we hear about any movie that gets announced now is about how it's going to be the worst thing you've ever seen in cinemas.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not wrong, but I was hoping that maybe we could look at this as an examination, but you're right. At the end of the day, even if they had done that, there's no way that we can't go back in time. We do not have Kronos' power to rewind the clock and see what would have happened had they not leaned into the fact that this is a remake, even though what is it remaking? His origin is completely different. His journey with the powers of being the Crow are completely different. Like, Sejin complained in our very special episode that there were no stakes. They did a pretty good job at fucking putting stakes into this film. I was super impressed with how they injected stakes with the whole thing of like, as long as your love for her remains pure, you are invulnerable. And then when he sees something that like gives him even the smallest bit of doubt in how much he loves this version of Shelley, he's killed. He dies again. And then he is and then that beautiful line of the opposite, the opposite of love is the weakness of love is not hate, it is doubt. And I'm just like, that fucking hits, right? Because like love and hate are such a tenuous thing, and obviously you would think because they're opposites that hate would be the natural enemy of love, but no, it's when you begin to doubt. Right? Like you question if this person is being faithful to you, if this person still loves you as much as you claim to love them, if you love them as much as they claim to love you, like doubt being the central conflict of his first round of Crow like powers is really cool. And then what he's willing to give up, that he says my soul for her soul, if it means completing this revenge mission, like it's nice. It's like this really good, like, I was thinking all I could hear was your voice being like, these were my issues with the original film, and how almost all of them were corrected by this remake. Because it's not a remake.
It does have a lot of the same beats though, right?
Yes.
Because like you pointing out, like this whole moment where he loses his powers because he kind of goes against what the whole point of the Crow was, but then once he's able to have that moment of them coming back to him and take all I could think was the end of this was the end of the first one, and here we are getting it right at the beginning of the third act,
at the break into
so
three.
Much more, which is so much more like because then we get to do the whole what was the boardroom scene in the last one, but the opera house in this one, and that is just madness. Yeah.
That opera scene is incredible. First of all,
setting
it to like Boudica is incredible, but then like just the way that it progresses, and it's so kinetic, and it's so beautiful, and it is so like we know that he feels everything. So anytime he like willingly hurts himself in order to take down an enemy, like there's so much more on the table for it.
I don't know how much, like I know that James O'Barr was involved in the making of this one because he's been very vocal about that. Yeah. I don't know how much actual pen to paper they let him do in this, but I do know for a fucking fact that had to be from him. That line when Danny Houston has him at the end, and he's like, "You don't feel anything, do you?" And he's just like, "I feel it all." Yeah. It was just like, yeah, that's the line. That is the James O'Barr line. I feel it all.
I feel everything. It's just,
God.
yeah, God,
I didn't know I had a good Danny Houston.
yeah, it was a pretty good Danny Houston. I gotta be completely honest with you. But and that's the other thing is, if this were a remake, right? Another one of Sejan's complaints, right? I'm sorry that I'm assuming that nobody listened to it, but also we haven't even released it by the time we're recording this Time Capsule episode, looking at the 2024 The Crow. But Sejan's complaint about the first movie was that it's The Crow versus a mortal enemy. Right? It is a magical creature going up against essentially a human. So, the stakes and what can be done in those moments feels sort of diminished, right? There's one person who kind of uses magic, and even then, how much knowledge Micah actually has in The Crow 94 is left up to the imagination of the viewer. They don't really do anything to, the most she does is kind of divining, right? When she burns the eye to somehow see the future. We don't see her with any real deep knowledge, right? And then by the very nature of how that first film is made, right? The idea of the Crow being this representation of Brandon Lee's powers as Eric Draven is something that is added after the fact because of Brandon Lee's tragic passing. Right? That is them working on their feet, sort of improvising based on what they have on how to finish the film. Excuse me. But this movie, he's going up against a for real crooked man. To not be a total asshat about it, but Danny Houston plays somebody who made a deal with the devil, and what that deal entitles is you will live forever as long as you keep providing to me pure souls, right? Pure souls mean you have a semi-immortality. And that's cool. That is a cool villain. He is a villain who can whisper the frickin' Winter Soldier trigger words into your ear, and then suddenly you're a white-eyed, basically zombified, brainwashed person, and what is controlling you is your darkest emotions and desires and thoughts, which then leads you to either kill yourself or kill others. And then if you kill yourself and you were pure beforehand, your soul goes straight to hell, and Danny Houston gets a few more years added on to his total. Or
it did also seem like it always had to be with that dagger
knife,
from the shadow.
Specifically
there.
The knife
came back, by the way.
It did come back. Who's happy about the shadow dagger? It's Sejan. But yeah, no, it is. Yeah, he was given a specific knife that if this takes life. But then also I don't know if he gets anything, but her soul clearly was not pure, right? Shelley's mother's soul is not pure.
Oh, you're about to talk about because he also just has the ability to just make people just do shit, right?
Yeah,
is the other side.
Well, not necessarily do shit. It's all of us have dark thoughts, right? And we manage them however we manage them. But it gives all of your defenses go down, and your darkest thoughts, desires, and anxieties flood to the forefront, and you are a slave to them, which is kind of scary, right? When you talk about this film has some thoughts about mental health, right? And it's I don't know. This is unrelated to The Crow, but everything that happened with Liam Payne in Argentina. And when I left the house this morning, the news was saying that it was a suicide. But then as I heard, the radio stations talk about it, it was just he fell from a balcony. They downgraded it from that original suicide talk to it being an accident. And then one of the DJs on the radio, as I was driving around this morning, I was running really early morning errands, kind of made it about how they also have mental issues. And I'm we all grieve in different ways, but it's really weird that you're as somebody who suffers with mental issues, I can understand what Liam Payne was going through. And it's I don't know if you can, because you're alive to tell us that. It was.
I think it's important that if people talk about these things and don't hide them behind closed doors, personally. But
yeah. I think it's important too. But I think there's a time and there's a place for it, and it just seemed real.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe in the moment when somebody just killed themselves might be a thing, Dan. Like, I think it's important now to talk about these things.
I don't know, but I think there's a way to talk about it. I think because I know the DJ and I listen to them and they tend to do that, it felt more like ego centerizing and how it related to their experience than like trying to open up a frank conversation about mental illness. I know this is like kind of far off from The Crow, but like the fact that the guy essentially heightens all of your mental weaknesses and turns them against you, that was a fucking choice for that character. And I don't know if a character like that would have worked pre-2024.
Yeah, he's just terrifying, and I have these like weird, like when the movie started, and you kind of get the beat right away the second you see Danny Houston. Oh, that's the guy, that's the big bad, and I immediately thought, man, we're gonna watch Eric Draven plow through so many fucking people, and then he's not gonna get to like really to have any fun with Danny Houston's character. I was like, he's just going to show up and it's just going to be this old man. They're not going to be able to have any. And then all of a sudden at the end of this movie, he beats the shit out of an old man.
Shit out of him. And the really nice thing is that they have done so much build to that moment that Danny Houston fucking deserves it. They do
it's
not
awful.
only does
like he's awful.
Yeah. And not only does he deserve it, right? But they have also dehumanized him to the fact that he's essentially a demon that needs to be stopped by the power of the Crow.
Oh yeah. No, essentially that's exactly what it is. I mean, he is the target.
Yes.
From moment one. That's the other thing that's a big difference. Is there's not this whole like we talked about this more with the comic, I think. No, this is in the movie where he feels like his power. The reason why his power leaves him is because he thinks like his job is done, and then he realizes what Top Dollar did, and his powers come back for one more revenge, right? But there's none of that in this one. In this one, he is told this guy needs to be stopped, and he spends the whole movie trying to get to this guy, right? And like, and who we're talking about, by the way, is a character by the name of Vincent Rogue. And the only reason that that's important is this is how you can tell what an evil bastard he is. He's the only character in this movie to get a full name. Like, no shit. He is the only character in the entire roster of this movie to get a first and last name. Sometimes you get, like, Detective Somebody or something like that, or, like, Inmate Somebody, but you don't get, like, a first name, last name for anybody else in this movie except for him.
Yeah. And also, his name is Rogue. Like, that's his last name is Rogue. Spelled R-O-E-G. Like, it's just like, we want you to understand that this is the bad guy. But there was also this little tiny moment. And it's when he says that he was born in Vienna, which is a really like interesting thing for him to be like, I'm a European, but like he doesn't have a European accent, right? He talks like he's been in America for a while. So then that reveal that he has been alive for centuries is really interesting. But like, he then wants to like surround himself with pure souls from Vienna, the cradle of music. Like, I love music. My other theory, right, instead of like this is the original Eric and Shelley resurrected and a new story of their souls, right? My other theory is that he's fucking Salieri. Like, he's Salieri and he made a deal with the devil after his inadequacies with Mozart. Like, and I'm just like, I'm fine with that. This being a semi-sequel to Amadeus, sign me to fuck up. Yeah. Like, he died, he went to hell, and the devil was like, so what you did with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, like driving him to madness and bringing what should have been a pure soul down here for me? How would you like to do that for a job, Mr. Salieri? It can be your masterpiece.
I do think, right, they do all this work to definitely make him the fucking worst of the worst, right? And so, like, he gets his comeuppance, super cathartic and all that, right? I think, though, this one also really works for me a lot more than the original one did, in the regard that it really does confront the fact that Eric is a fucking monster himself, right? Yes. Like, in the first one, I think he's actually much more violent in this one than he is even in the first one. And in the original, I mean. And so, like, the ways in which it just, you talked about this earlier, like the ways in which the opera scene progresses and things just get more and more violent and crazier till he finally ends that scene walking on stage with two severed heads in his hands that he then throws into an audience full of people that have nothing to do with the story as far as I can tell. We're not given any indication that this is like a room full of like hoity-toity like down like they're not people that we are told we should not like.
They are basically just innocents. They're fans of the opera.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're at the opera, but, like, I pay $20 to go see an opera sometimes. Like
no, that's it.
I could have been sitting in that audience.
Their only crime is that they attended this showing of Boudicca. Like, that's their crime tonight. They don't die for that crime, but they maybe get a little traumatized. They get a little traumatized.
Considering a guy walks on stage with two severed heads, throws them into the audience, and to escape that, you run outside to what is a waiting bloodbath of bodies all over the stairs.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, no, people are fucked up after this night.
The best part about that is that he leaves and gets into the car that belonged to Marion and her suitor/bodyguard. Like, I don't, like, fully understand the relationship between Marion and I don't know his name because he is not, I don't know. I still don't know. It's not Wickham. I don't know who it is. Like, Jay, maybe? Like, I don't know. It's not Trigger. Trigger is the best one. Trigger is when he walks by him smoking the cigarette and he's like, I killed you. like I'm like, Trigger, you're the Tintin of this film. I hate to say that to you because you're going to be the first one who dies, but also, like, you're kind of comic relief villain here. I killed you. Like, just like, he's not freaked out by the fact that the guy he just literally suffocated till he was dead walked by. His reaction is not like, holy fuck, it's a ghost. It's, man, I killed you. Like, and then that whole scene of like, you're going to give me names, and he goes for the guns, and it's like he almost accidentally shoots him because he still wants information from him.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's an almost. You were bringing this scene up, and I'm glad you did because I was about to, but I am going to use this to also point out something else in the movie, just inconsistent wise, that has to be talked about because they make such a big deal in that moment when he shoots that gun that it, like, the sound drops out, he holds his ear, he screams in pain because it hurt to shoot the gun. And I think you're right. I don't think he meant to shoot the guy, like, because he wanted information from him. So he's, like, also just, like, he cannot believe everything that just happened in that second, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward to the end of this movie where there are 20 people conservatively firing many different handguns outside of that opera. Nobody hears a thing in there. Are the sound locks that good on that theater?
Not only that lady is singing at the top of her lungs, Sujin. You are transfixed.
I was just like, oh, he's got to. Well, because they make a big deal out of him with the sword. Fucking love him with the sword, by the way.
And I love that it's like not a katana.
This is fantastic.
It's a short sword.
If he's gonna,
sorry. That's a kunai that he's using. It's just brilliant. Sorry, continue.
No, but like the whole thing is like he's gonna go around and kill everybody, but it's gonna be silent because he doesn't want to disrupt what's going on inside. He's got a sword. Within 2 seconds, somebody shoots a gun, and I'm like, oh, never mind. That's not gonna happen at all. and then he gets guns, and then like everybody's got guns, and it's just like okay.
But I mean, you've been to the opera, Siege, and you're so transfixed by what is happening on the stage.
If they had not made such a huge deal earlier in the movie and drew my attention to something that I was like, oh, how cool! They're really like they're getting into kind of like the gritty idea that like he's bad at this at first and like it doesn't really fire guns and doesn't know what it's gonna be like. And I don't mind that by the end of this movie his character is better at handling weapons. Everything that happens in this movie totally makes sense that he is as badass that he is at the end of the movie.
Oh, he's a Pokemon. He evolves as the film goes on.
Right. Yeah. What doesn't evolve is everybody's like hearing.
The world doesn't get the same. Yeah. I mean, there is that really, because that initial reaction to like, oh, it fucking hurts when you pull a gun. And I'm like, I know you're diff right now, Eric, but like your eardrum's going to heal. You're going to be okay. And then like he gets better. Like he heals from it. And I know that I didn't do that, but I did kind of like in my head, I'm like, I talked him through it as his body like did the weird stitching of his eardrum back together, right? Yeah. I clapped for Tinkerbell.
Oh my God. Can we talk about, by the way, the effect of his body stitching itself back together?
beautiful. It
Like,
is goddamn
super,
gorgeous.
like if you're not into CGI, sorry, you're not. It's pure CGI. But the concept, the artistic concept of like watching it literally like squirt like strings across itself to like sew itself back together. It was upsetting. It was gross in all the right ways.
Yeah, it was nice, but it was also like it felt more realistic. I mean, it's still computer generated imagery. Siege is not wrong about that. But it felt more like how your body would actually heal in those moments, as opposed to the like, and now the hole's gone. That happens in the original Crow. Or even how like
Which I thought they were going to do
healed.
again with him as a kid in this one, by the way. Did you see that?
Oh, I was expecting when he came back him to look at his hands and those scars to be gone. Like, I wanted that to be the indication moment of, like, now you have the power, now you have the invulnerability, was just a slight... Because he very clearly has that barbed wire scar across his hands as an adult to let us know that that kid who rescued the white horse and then maybe blew up the trailer where his negligent parents were living, right? I like that was never, like... told to us, but like there was just that one
has like
flashback.
Fire burns on himself.
Yeah, he has burns on himself from that. And I wonder, I mean, even if he's not the one who caused it, like he witnessed his parents die in that explosion. And it very well could have been like a fucking gas leak in that trailer. Because the way that they're passed out, like there are burning flames going on in there. So it's, it's beautiful. But also like the fact that when we see him at the rehab center and like he's looking at his hands and he still has those scars, like that was a cool indication that he was fucking little Atreyu at the beginning of the film. Like I loved that. It worked for me. And so I'm like, they made such a big deal about those scars. It'd be great if when he like wakes up from his first time in limbo in conversation with Kronos, he looked at his hands and those scars were gone. Right? Like just one show don't tell 15 seconds of this movie that I was expecting that I was disappointed never happened. I'm just like, but it's okay. Like they do a really good thing because they also do that thing where I'm like, if they made this movie in 2024, the cops would be in on it. Yup, the cops are in on it. The cops are on motherfucking Vincent Rogue's payroll.
Yeah, but again, like watching Eric come back and stumble into his first kill, like was really interesting, right? Like he's not just automatically good at this. He's not just a killing machine when he wakes up, but because of his powers, like he kind of can't help but make it through that first fight, right?
Yeah, I mean he's really like that one is cool. I like that first fight against the detective, especially the way that it ends with like the cop kind of falling on the knife that he's holding, as opposed to it being like an active act of murder on his part is very interesting. Ditto what happens with Trigger in the car, where he kind of like essentially accidentally shoots him. And then what I think is like the greatest use of immortality, invulnerability in cinema, at least in recent memory, when he lets the SUV hit him and lands in a way so that he goes through the glass when it breaks. Like he bends his body so that he becomes a projectile, and then suddenly I'm in the car with you assholes. But then when he's in the car with those assholes, he's still not a very good fighter. Like he's just trying to do what he can to do damage, and ultimately he gets thrown out of the moving vehicle, run over by a flatbed truck, and then like he has to kick his broken like leg bone into place for his leg to heal. Like, it is very, I mean, they're graphic, like, very, very graphic, visceral shots shown in this film.
I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, there is so much violence in this movie.
Yeah.
It is not afraid to get gory.
It's not afraid
ultra
to
violent
do it,
even. But man, like the shots are gorgeous. Him walking up those stairs in the opera house and getting shot, and just then he falls to his knees, and like that shot of him looking down the stairs with him just bleeding out while he's like leaning on the sword, right? And fucking. And then the jump up and scream to stab the guy was just perfect.
The jump up and scream,
man, that dude is just like, he's a fucking machine. Like he really was just phenomenal in this movie. Completely buy into him as the action star at the end of this movie, and like like watching him with a ton of the choreography, just phenomenal. And then also just like watching him be Eric was just awesome. It was just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, he was still a doof. Like, he still was
Yeah.
not the coolest guy in the room. And I dug that. But I also dug, like, they gave a reason why, right? This guy, like, by his own account in the whole step into the circle exercise, felt abandoned by the world, right? So why would he try to be cool or badass or anything like that? He wears his heart on his sleeve. He is so genuine. And like that scene where they go to the quarry that everybody has access to in the eyes of Hollywood, like I love that in terms of like building his character, because he's still like kind of this doofy loser. And then he goes to the Adam, I believe is the name of the tattoo artist. And he's just like, I need to know more about Shelley. Like, that's a friend that they had in common. And it sucked when he got shot. I was so mad when he died. But then, oh God. And then after he dies and he makes the transfer and is given the black blood of the crow, which gives him the ability to pass between the dimensions, like so much lore, so much good lore, so much lore that makes so much sense. And I loved it. I'm thrilled by it. But it's also, once he has that black blood and he is something more than Eric, right? He is, by all accounts, what Brandon Lee's crow is from the beginning of the film, that he then undergoes that metamorphosis to be like a killing machine. Like, I totally buy it. I totally buy how the guy who like was timid the first time he shot somebody and like knew enough that like I can fly through this windshield and get into the car with them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be able to punish them for their actions. Like, it's just such good visual storytelling at how he evolves from being this person who like was bullied at the rehabilitation center to a guy who like, I'm gonna take your shotgun and I'm gonna use it like a hammer to crack your skull open. Have a good day.
Oh God, yeah, that moment. Oh man, but that is when he first comes back, right? Like that's the first kill when he comes back. Yeah, shit, fuck. Man, it's just the way that this movie embraces the story that it wants to tell, right? And it just fucking goes for it, which I think is a better version of the problem that I had with that original one, which was that this movie just wants you to just kind of buy in and doesn't give a shit if you don't. This movie, as you pointed out, is also in that kind of same wheelhouse, right? It's going to do what it's going to do, right? But the way that it then celebrates it, the way that it really just embraces it is fun. It just doesn't ever go far enough for me in certain places. Like I wanted it to be a little more over the top, I guess. I think what it is like is we talk about like Danny Houston, we talked about how he is this really evil dude and you really buy that he really deserves what he gets in the end, right? But like I wanted to watch him get vicious, right? We never get to see him get vicious. And I guess that's kind of supposed to be the point, right? Is that he's like kind of at the end of the day, as much as he is this big bad in this whole thing, he is just a man and he's a weak man because we know he's a weak man because of this deal that he has made, right? It's just that like, okay, but you got to give me something. Give me a big old demon for him to fight, right? Like give me something. Like the end of the last final moments of this movie almost feel kind of like meh. Like they kind of feel cathartic. I don't want to deny that I wanted what happened in those moments to happen, but like I wanted more. Like every moment of this movie, I was just like, man, I wish that they had done a little bit more of that. You know, their relationship, like I wanted 10, 15 more minutes of that, which I guess is not the worst complaint to have about a thing, right? Is like, I want more of this. I wanted a little bit more every second of the way.
You wanted the ending to be more The Crow 1994 and less Ghost. Because that's what it felt like to me, is when Tony Goldwyn gets pulled down into hell by the little demons at the end of Ghost. I'm like, wow, there's some real Ghost imagery right now. And honestly, that he punched Danny Houston in the face like 19 times before he threw him to the snakes and the dark hands at the bottom of the river. But like, yeah, it would have been nice if like he had that moment like with Top Dollar where he throws him onto a fucking gargoyle and the gargoyle's drainage system is red from the blood that has been like just flowed through it.
maybe this is just a Crow problem for me, right? Like it's a Superman problem. Is like I just don't see why I should feel worried at any point for Eric. I just don't like there we are guaranteed every step of the way that he's going to get the revenge he wants, he deserves, really. Like I don't know why I would downplay it. Like it's definitely the revenge he deserves, right? It's like and that's what the movie's gonna be, is watching that and getting that and being happy about that. And there's just this part of me that's just like, but I wanna feel like he overcame something.
Right. And that is, if I had a huge complaint about this narrative, they do so much to inject into this film the idea of stakes, right? The original, like, he's like, you get to go back and you get to get your revenge on the people who hurt you. And if you're able to do that without, like, your pure love for Shelley waning, you both get to come back to life, right? The souls that should go to, like, the beyond for what they did are enough of a payment for you to return back to life. But, and it's the biggest but in the world, your love for Shelley during this killing spree that, like, is God sanctioned, essentially, your love for her cannot wane in the least. It has
It's like
to
you
remain
can both leave
pure
Hades
love.
but don't look back, right?
Right,
Like
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, phenomenal.
It's exceptional, and they're real stakes. So that, like, when he watches that video, and you see how fucking stomach churning watching the woman he loves take that life is for him, it really is like, oh fuck, like this is him potentially waning on his feelings. And then Adam, the tattoo artist, saying to him, like, if you knew what you know now, then would you have loved her any differently? And it's like, and that gives the doubt, like, that more life, right? Because he's clearly
I think you're
has.
talking about Chance. Are you talking about Chance? No, who is that?
Is it? I don't know. It might be Chance. Yeah, it is Chance. I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought it was Adam. They're similar. I not just based on the pictures and the names and all of that. Yeah, it's Jordan Bolger. Adam is another one of their friends. So, like, I don't feel like crazy bad about that. But yeah, no, it's Chance. The tattoo artist is why I keep saying that, because I wasn't 100% on his name. And when he, like, gives that thought, like, any sort of legs, that's when Eric truly wanes on the purity of his love to Shelley and ultimately fails. And then, you know, it's a situation where, like, you know, you're at the game over screen, and here comes, like, the developer of the game, and he's like, all right, well, you lost. Sorry, you don't get to play again. And then he's like, well, what if I get to play again, but I guarantee the bad ending? Like, I can't get the good ending from here on out, but, like, I get to continue this playthrough of my revenge. And it's like, oh, I don't know. You know how bad the fucking bad ending is?
So what do we... So what's up with Kronos?
What's up with Kronos?
What's up with Kronos?
He's the
let's
skull
talk
cowboy.
about Kronos for a second.
That's what he is. He's the skull cowboy, but, you know, in the form of the Greek Titan of time.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's exactly who he is, right?
Yeah.
Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. And like the crow imagery and stuff actually is really cool in that regard, because like there's actually a ton of that kind of stuff back in that. Like, so like he is definitely like the Titan Kronos, right?
Yes, without a doubt. You don't give him that name with that spelling, and it's not him. Like, and I think
have him in a story like this, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is very much this Greek tragedy story to
like
it, right?
you said
There's a
about
lot.
like, don't look back, right? You can both leave Hades, but you can't look back. And then she looked back, you idiot. Wasted.
But it also, you know, and that's also really interesting, because it's hard for me as a good Catholic boy growing up to not automatically try and think, oh, he's an angel or like something like that, right? Or is this God incarnate or something, right? So when Kronos offers him the second deal, I'm like, like that's not what God would do, right? God would there's gonna be a like he's gonna come out in the end and be like, just kidding, you can both live, and that doesn't happen, right? Like that's just categorically is not what happens at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
There's something about it being the idea of the Greek Titan Kronos, where actually that lands real, but like that, like real hard. Like, yeah, that would be exactly what would have happened in a Greek story, right? Is like, okay, you fucked up. Okay, here's a different deal. Fine, but that is the deal we're sticking to. And sure enough, like, right, like that is the tragedy. Is that
yep.
yeah, and it's like I don't know why you, God of Time, can't just do it the other way still, but okay.
Because there has to be a payment, but also it's the fact that like that deal, the second deal, is a deal that Eric brings to the table. It is not like Kronos says, all right, well, now it's over, but you get to go to the other side. Happy birthday. It's not like he's like, or like what we could do is you could swap her soul for yours. Like, it doesn't come from him. The fact that it comes from, I mean, this is a Greek tragedy through and through, as I am like now examining it and calling Kronos exactly what he is. And then the ultimate ending of this movie was going to be the fact that Shelley gets to live, but now she has to live without Eric, which for Eric was a fate worse than death. So,
yeah,
like it is. And the original ending to this film was not a sequel tag. It was just Eric is dead and Shelley is alive.
Yeah, they did a really nice job. Really, I say really nice, but it does kind of rub me the wrong way a little bit. But I will give the credit where credit's due because it definitely works. I don't have a problem with it on any logistical reason, just my feelings about narrative. But they do a good job of saying, this is the end of this story. We may never see this guy again. But we could, right? It's like they do that one real nice.
I mean, I wrote down the final like soliloquy from the film, and mostly I wrote it down because I feel like it supports my idea that these are Brandon Lee, Eric Draven, and Sarah Shanice.
You just want them to be
Shelley
Hawkman and Hawkgirl.
I do not just want them to be Hawkman and Hawkgirl. That is the meanest thing you've ever said to me. But the soliloquy of our love will live on in everything she does. Someday I know our souls will find each other again. Till then I will have just a memory, that perfect sensation of loving her, and that's enough. Almost enough. So to me, that little speech is that, like, this is not the first time that their souls have found each other again. Right? Which, yeah, so yeah, you want to call it what it fucking is? Yeah, it's a little Hawkman and Hawkgirl, right? Fucking, I'll admit it, but it is. It's
I'm going to take on these bird powers and find you again one day.
Yup. And so then I'm certainly all right with this being a reboot, The Crow Reborn, and the soul of Eric Draven and the soul of Shelley, I can't think of her name, Webster being resurrected in 2024, or, around the time that they passed, right? And given the chance to meet up again and experience love on the human plane of existence.
If you don't want to do Hawkman and Hawkgirl, can we do Hancock?
I've never seen Hancock, but yes.
Oh, it's just a Hawkman movie. Did you really?
Have you
never seen it?
I've really never seen it.
It's basically a Hawkman movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyway. Cool. I saw my super ex-girlfriend, and I was like, you know what? These superhero movies that are like high concept genre films, not for me.
Not for me.
And I'm okay with that. But yeah, like that's, so that whole speech made me feel like, yeah, this is just us getting to see that their love is eternal and they found each other again, but circumstances conspired against them once more. And like, it sucks that happened, but you did get to have like at least some time of the purest love that I've ever seen. It was one of those things where I'm like, they barely fucking know each other. How am I supposed to buy that, like, their love is so strong he is given the chance to be the weapon of retribution and vengeance that he'll become? And then 20 more minutes of movie happened, and I'm like, I would die for either of them. Their love, take me, Kronos. I will be the crow.
Now, I do think, though, it is key that you. I don't think you're wrong. The story itself does not support itself very well. It is saved by Bill Skarsgård and FKA twigs. Like their on-screen chemistry, the ways in which they play these characters that we have seen before, maybe not to Devin's theory, but the ways in which they embrace these two characters and give us these beautiful versions of the two of them work because of them, right? Otherwise, the story does not do a great job. Sometimes the dialogue falters a little bit, but they are fantastic.
Yeah, when they're in the tub together and she's like, what's the worst? Well, he's like, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Oh, this one time I broke out of a rehabilitation institute with a stranger man. And it's like, it's probably the best thing I ever did. Like, the love between these two is so palpable. I could cut it with a knife. It wouldn't even need to be a sharp knife. It could be a razor blade tied to a toothbrush and a shank that, like, before he saw her, he was contemplating killing himself. There are so many, like, dark things that are on display in this fucking movie.
Yeah, and like tropey things, right? Dark tropey things. Yes. But like that's exactly what The Crow is, right?
Yeah. You should know with a Crow movie, you should understand what you're getting. Anyone who saw this movie and was like, oh, I didn't like it. It's like, well, like, had you ever seen a Crow film before? And again, like, I'm saying this as a person who, like, the stuff I knew about The Crow before yesterday was zero. I knew zero about The Crow. I knew it was based on a comic book, right? And I knew that the film was filmed in various sets from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle 1990s film. So, like, that was enough for me to be like, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of The Crow because I bet there'll be some frickin' overlap and some interesting things to look at. And then when we're like, well, we both have access to the 2024 film, why don't we do that one for our time capsule episode, as we've done in the past, right? With like Thor, Love and Thunder and other things. Like, it's not weird for us to do a time capsule dedicated to a new film, knowing that, like, let's dump all of our feelings into the time capsule and then people will get our raw reaction, but they'll have hopefully had time to see the movie. Right? We're not dropping spoilers on people when the film is 2 days old.
Right.
And I was not expecting to enjoy the level of enjoyment I had for the first Crow film. I was not expecting this film to work for me on the level that it did. But they did a great job writing a unique narrative, injecting stakes into it, making it feel like a film from 2024, right?
Yeah.
And it really makes me sad that nobody seemed to enjoy this film. And it seems like at the beginning and end of the day that the only reason is because it deigned to call itself a remake of the Crow film from 1994, which stands as this legacy monolith to the life and talents of Brandon Lee.
Again, a movie that around me, people spent my entire life telling me was a bad movie. Like, I liked The Crow and was constantly ridiculed for my like of The Crow. This is not me whining and complaining.
This is Sejan's origin story, everybody. This is where he came from.
And that is why I am now The Crow. No, but like, as we pointed out in the episode proper for the 94 one, I was wrong about that, right? Like, it was a successful film at the time, a very successful film at the time, which explains why it has this whole franchise after it of movies and a TV show and stuff like that. Like it is a successful thing, but it is not one of those things that, much like I said about this film, this 2024 film, it didn't seem to have the sticking power for people. It just, like, it hits big, people like it, and then it didn't quite work. And I think that this movie, if more people had seen it, probably kind of have the same story, unfortunately. But I think that's the important thing. But the important thing to remember about all of this is exactly that. People are talking so much shit about this movie, and by all accounts, nobody saw it.
Yeah. I don't. it seems like it's one of those things where like, oh, you're stomping on something that I care about from my childhood, and you must be the worst person in the world for that. And it's just
Thing
like,
I didn't talk about for 30 years, but it was really important to me. Sorry, I
yeah,
don't mean
right.
to like police what people want to find important in their life, but the number of people that I've never heard talk about The Crow suddenly have like diehard feelings about The Crow have been pretty interesting.
I mean, I brought up the Ninja Turtles one in terms of the original Crow, and I remember it was like 2011 when I was invited to go to a screening of that movie, and the intention of everybody at that screening was to make fun of the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, which was not known to me. I'm like, oh, I get to go to like an auditorium full of people and watch one of my favorite movies on the big screen? Sign me the fuck up. But everybody that like was there was like, oh, this movie's a piece of shit. I can't wait to tear into it. And I'm just like, people don't like the Ninja Turtles movie? That just doesn't feel right to me. And then afterwards, my whole party was like, wow, that was a really good movie. I don't know why everybody was expected to like mock it. And I'm like, yeah, neither do I. And it kind of feels in some way that same sort of like feeling about it, right? Because then like that movie is now beloved. The 1990 Ninja Turtles movie, I don't think I could find a person who would have a bad thing to say about that film. And part of that feels like because of the 2014 Michael Bay film, right? And just the heaps of umbrage that were piled upon that film.
The Star Wars problem. They just need to release a new trilogy, and suddenly the sequel trilogy will become everybody's favorite, right? Like that's
yeah.
That's exactly what you're talking about. Is all we need to wait is for 2032's The Crow, and everybody's going to talk about, man, remember that 2024 one that was actually real good, and nobody wanted to talk about it then because we were all afraid because everybody was talking shit about it.
Like it honestly feels like, and especially with so much being said from people who worked on the original film. Like Ernie Hudson, I'm sad that Ernie Hudson doesn't show up in this in some cameo. That would have been like, this movie's already like high for me, but then to hear him talk about it and he's like, I've never been able to bring myself to watch the film because of the loss of Brandon Lee, and like getting to work with him and see what a natural talent he was, and then to see that extinguished while it had so much potential. So he's like, I've never seen the sequels, I've never watched the original, and he's like, and in some weird way I felt the sequels were like kind of casting shadows on his legacy. And then for the director of that movie to come out and be like, oh my god, how do you remake The Crow? It's such like you're spitting on the legacy. And Bill Skarsgård like coming out like the doof that Eric is in this movie and being like, I mean, you do know that it had 3 sequels, right? Like it never was like this one beautiful castle upon the hill. Like it was a community, it was a franchise. Like, I get you can have your opinion, but it's weird that, like, you didn't come out mad about City of Angels in fucking 96, or you didn't come out mad about Salvation. Like, where is this coming from now? And it's what Sejan talked about. It is the way that we allow not just fans to like troll films, but also the people who were like tied to the original. It's sort of the Ghostbusters Afterlife problem. If I'm putting words in your mouth, it's just from every time that you've talked about it, how like squishy it makes you feel that Jason Reitman stood on a stage and said, we're making the sequel that the fans want to see. Like, that is such a, like, who the fuck are you to tell me as a fan the movie that I want to see? Right? Yeah. You're assuming a lot about your fan base there. And it's...
Well, especially when we have all of this stuff in the world about like, no, we know the sequel that was intended. It was called Ghostbusters 3 at one point, and they got turned into other things. Like we don't lie. Don't tell us this is the sequel that was always intended, or the sequel that was meant to be, or the sequel that the fans really want. Like don't use any of that language. Like admit what this is, and this is you wanting to revisit a thing that your father was very involved in. That would have been something that would have really spoken to me. Right? Is like I really wanted to do something with this franchise that at this point is in a very dangerous spot. in order to honor my father and his friends that made this film. That I could see being a very good reason to do what you did. But yeah, I do think there is also something to the difference between Ghostbusters and what happened with The Crow, right? Is like we talked about this with the idea that Brandon Lee got to make that movie, right? And he got to have his say in how that movie got made, and his family was approached, and there's all this stuff about how his family his fiance specifically, right, was said like, no, he would want this movie to be finished, he would want this movie to be out there in front of people, right? And like, so that idea that like we do have a sense of what his exact opinion on the matter is. I'm not saying it's a perfect one, and people can question that too, but for me, it's enough. I believe that Brandon Lee would have wanted that movie to be finished by all accounts, from everything that I understand. And I believe that he would have also been okay in that same regard with movies being what movies are, and sequels being made, and people wanting to be involved with a character that he got to originate and create, right? I'm sure that in the grand scheme of things, he would have liked to have been the one in those sequels. He would have liked to have been more involved in the making of all of that, and really had a much more of a handle like on the life he should have had, right? But I don't think that for one second that he would have been as offended about some of the things that some people out there are acting like they're as offended about. You know, there's definitely instances where we hear about this stuff. I think about like Gene Wilder and some of the things he had to say when Tim Burton announced that he was doing his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and like they were harsh. He had some harsh opinions about how he felt like it was an unnecessary thing and all of this sort of stuff, right? But I had a feeling at the time that I still share now, is that like, I don't know why like Gene Wilder gets to be the one to dictate this to the world. Like, I get that he had a very important role in this character's existence in the zeitgeist, but like at the end of the day, like there's tons of reasons why you can go back to this stuff. There's tons of reasons why you can explore this stuff. I don't know, maybe it's just the theater background that we have, where like the idea of something being restaged is the whole lifeblood of that industry. And somehow when we translated that acting and directing and set design and all of that shit to form to screen, we lost that idea that like we can redo this, we can retry this, we can revisit this, and like, I don't know why, because it's such a great way to explore art. It's like the way that theater is explored. Most often, 90% of the time, theater is explored by restaging something that somebody else did. You know, very, very, like, as far as successful theater goes, very, very little of it is original.
Yeah. Yes. And even then, like, restaging it so that we see the themes of something like The Crucible, and how they still are, like, The Crucible is written in the freaking 1950s because of everything that's going on with MacArthur and looking for communists in America. The literal witch hunt that was going on in the 1950s America at the time. Mm-hmm. And then let's fucking hold up that mirror to the witch hunts that went on in Salem in the 1600s. Right? Like, that's the whole point of it. And if we were to look to restage The Crucible now, like, that same sort of thing about how people's opinions are being sought out, and once they say or do one thing, like, they're damned forever, right? Yeah. It is like hopefully the themes of a piece of art can have that universality and be applied, or at least find a way to be applied, right? Yet Gene Wilder coming out and being like, why the fuck are you remaking Willy Wonka into Chocolate Factory? And it being like, well, first of all, he's making Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. You know that film you were in was based on a book, right, Gene? Like, that, like, it was an adaptation of a book written by Roald Dahl, and by all accounts, it wasn't the best adaptation of that book, right? And now, what? 30 years later, 40 years later, this guy wants to come along and like kind of look into that actual book and adapt that story for better or for ill, right? The Oompa Loompas being a tribe that he enslaved, being a thing that exists in the 2000s, version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but not in the 60s version of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that's crazy, right? The Oompa Loompas just exist in that movie. We don't explore their origins and the fact that Willy Wonka was able to enslave them.
No,
right?
In fact, somebody asks him about their origins, and he's just like, "Oh, wouldn't you like to know?" And then dances out the door.
Yeah, right? Like, it's like, there's a lot there. Or the fact that, like, the kids just die in the 60s story, but, like, there are consequences to their actions in Roald Dahl's original novel, right? So it's so weird. Like, and then looking at The Crow, right? Even looking at Ninja Turtles, there is source material that exists. And if another creative person wants to look at that source material and derive a new adaptation of that, why should we not celebrate that? Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, and if you wanna have an opinion on it, experience the art first, right? Like, you can be like, oh fuck, they're doing The Crow again. But until you sit down and watch The Crow, I'm not saying you have to pay for it, right? But you have to pay with the most precious resource, your time, right? Give your time to the film, and then you can tell me whatever you want about the thing, right? But its sheer existence being a thing that allows you to formulate an opinion, your opinion means fucking nothing to me. Because all you've done is like, they shouldn't have remade that movie. Oh, okay. Right? I don't think that they should ever remake Back to the Future. But if sometime in our lifetimes there is a remake of Back to the Future, I'm going to watch it.
There has been, in a sense, there's a Back to the Future musical.
Right?
And you know what I wouldn't doubt? I wouldn't doubt one day seeing some NBC Christmas special, live, like, television broadcast, Back to the Future, the musical, right? Like, I could see us, like, seeing that in front of our faces at some point. And for somebody, that's going to become the definitive version of that story to them.
Mm-hmm. The most impressive thing about the world that you just built is the fact that it would be NBC because they're owned by Universal, who also own Back to the Future. That was good attention to detail on your part there, Siegen. Had you said Fox, I would have ended the podcast immediately.
Oh yeah, because they never all share.
Yeah,
their
I know
shit.
they share that stuff all the time.
Like, oh yeah,
but
they're just fortresses guarding their IPs from one another.
No, but the safest bet is that it would be an NBC live performance. But also, isn't it not ironic, but kind of weird how, like, COVID killed those live performances, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't need them, right? Like, it was a way to get people to watch shows, but, like, now they realize, no, we have them, right? The fact that there hasn't been an exclusive live event, like musical presentation on any of these streaming services is kind of crazy to me, right? I mean, I guess there was, like, Dick Van Dyke's 100th birthday party, but that was, like, just a CBS special that then later aired on Paramount Plus, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's been recorded stuff, like Hamilton coming out and
right.
COVID and stuff like that, right? But, like, but as far as, like, a live event goes, no, yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange thing that we lost, and I wonder, I mean, part of the reason is that, like, you do it live so that, A, what the fuck could happen? How could this go wrong? Right? That is part of it. People love the schadenfreude of, like, oh my God, Jamie Foxx forgot his lines. What's going to happen? But then there's also the fact that, like, it is having that live audience to react, and what a huge liability in this post-COVID world where, like, I live in a house with people who get AARP, and AARP's article for September 2024 is COVID and, like, what it means that, like, the virus is still out there and mutating and, like, still weirdly this thing that's happening in the background after the world has decided we're going to get back to normal, right? Like, that's a crazy cover story in, like, with everything else that's going on in the country right now. For
well, what's
AARP,
even wilder is you look at it now and you think about the ways in which we treat the flu, right?
right?
And like the flu is pretty dangerous, folks. And like the fact that like basically we treat COVID like we treat the flu now.
Yeah, right. Because there's a yearly vaccination for it, and I mean, I don't know, but it's just this interesting thing of like we don't have those live events anymore. But again, yeah, Back to the Future had it. Beetlejuice, before the Beetlejuice sequel, had the musical. And in the wake of the sequel coming out, I am being reminded of how different to the original Beetlejuice story the Beetlejuice musical was. Like, oh yeah, like it's not just that movie, but on stage. They add a lot more stuff with like the afterlife and stuff with like Beetlejuice, like Lydia actually summoning him to kill her parents, and that like being a plot point in the musical. Like adaptation is the core of art, right? It's one of the things we talk about a lot on this show. So you looking at the source material of The Crow and being like, I think I could tell a different story here. And honestly, we've been telling Crow stories. Yes, it has been almost 20 years since we got a Crow movie, right? The last one was 2005. But that doesn't mean that this needed to be a full-on reboot or a full-on remake of the 94 film. It could have just been another movie in the franchise, right? It could have been a Re-quel. And friggin' you just bring one character back. Sarah is now all grown up, right? And aware of what happened before. And there you go. There's your sequel. But I mean, is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding this remake?
Just because,
like,
I
mean, I know
like
that I just went on a rant, but I'm sorry.
I feel like with the 94 one, there was a lot of talk when I was growing up about music from The Crow or inspired by The Crow. I know technically, like I think James O'Barr was a musician and did like music to accompany The Crow or something like that as like an album, if I remember correctly. And like Trent Reznor was involved in like when I was like younger and stuff like that. So all of that is to say, we rewatched the 94 one and noticeably didn't talk too much about the soundtrack. I don't know, it wasn't too like mind blowing for me. This one though, holy shit, where there's some good music beats in this one. I just wanted to point it out. There was just some really good music in this one.
Yeah, I think that this film, if there was an error in the 94 film, it is the fact that like there is great music in that movie. The mix does it no fucking favors.
Yes.
Like it is very much, you want to look at how like why sound mixing and sound design are Oscars. Like look no further than The Crow, a film that like, because of all of the musical stuff that's in the comic book, they take Eric Draven and make him a musician rather than the mechanic that he was in the source material. The reason he's a musician is because, man, like you put so much time and effort into the music of this comic book that like that's what we wanted to make this character. And then like The Cure write a song for the movie, but then unlike freaking Pat Benatar with like The Legend of Billie Jean, where she sang Invincible all the time, but like gave shit to the movie that inspired it, The Cure, like for 17 years, never performed the song they wrote for The Crow live in concert. Like it took them 17 years before they performed it live in front of an audience. And like there were times where like people bring up the moon, like, did we write that one for a movie? I don't fucking even remember that song, right? So as much as we are in 94, we are at a time in cinema where music is having this resurgence related to how important it is to the piece that you are engaging in, right?
Oh yeah, it's like the music side of the film industry had always been like one of the bigger sides, but it blossomed throughout like the 70s and 80s into its own industry, and the 90s was a high time for it. 90s was like it really hitting its groove for as far as I'm concerned. But you know, so take this with a grain of salt. As a person that grew up in the 90s
I think
was
that's
experiencing it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's not that music. But what I mean is, like, it's not that music and film weren't ever buddy before.
Right.
Right. But there is something about the idea that there were straight up movies where you felt like they were just making the movies for the soundtrack, right? And
The
like,
Graduate.
again, not that was unique to the 90s, but it
Oh, yeah, for
felt
the 90s,
so
yeah.
much more like it felt so much more like it would be you could succeed in that way, right? It wasn't like let's make a big commercial just for the music. It's let's make a big commercial for the music and win ourselves an Oscar while we're at it, huh?
Well, I mean, like, I've always talked about the fact that before it was so easy to own film, right? Which is something that came along in the 80s. And even then, I love every time you tell stories of like, yeah, we got a VHS tape, it cost us $100. Right? Like the way that people got to connect with film, other than the fact that, you know, they stayed in cinemas longer and they did a lot more like re-releases or reissues of prints.
Well, and remember, but there were also fewer cinemas to go to. So
true,
like, yes,
true.
a movie would be there longer, but if you lived more than 30 minutes away, you weren't going to the movie. It's like,
Right.
that wasn't a thing you did.
Yeah. It's not like, yeah, like I understand that like my parents love film because
What you did.
yeah, but you would buy the
but
soundtrack.
what you were getting to, is you go out and you get the soundtrack, right? Or you buy the book, or you buy the comic, or you buy the thing, right? And the music industry really thrived in that way for a lot of ways. But like, I would point specifically to Whitney Houston and The Bodyguard, right? Like
I would point to 1992. Yes.
Right. Which
Yeah.
I think really kind of emulates what I mean by it getting so big that like the music makes the movie makes the music, and it becomes this huge part of the whole industry at that point of who's going to do the big single. Oh, I'll be in this movie, but I get to rap the single that plays over the credits. Like that, like this is just a huge part of this industry in the 90s is the music side of it.
And not only that, the other side of that music movie, like, love affair that was going on is something in 92 where, like, Reservoir Dogs comes out. And one of the movies reason that's so celebrated is because Quentin Tarantino found this way to use songs that already existed, but then make it feel like they were written just for this movie. Like that's another thing that happens right around the same time as The Bodyguard, and to a lesser extent the Addams Family rap at the end of the Addams Family by MC Hammer, also in 92. We have
but I mean we talk about the Turtles, right?
Yeah.
And like Go Ninja Go and shit, right?
Yep. Like, it is definitely a thing that exists, but then that other thing that happens with Reservoir Dogs, and then we see that also grow through the 90s, which, like, so The Crow kind of feels like the first kind of marrying of those two schools of thoughts, where, like, we got The Cure to do a song for The Crow, but also we're going to use, like, Stone Temple Pilots, and we're going to use these, like, bands that are known in the grunge and, like, metal scene as, like, the interstitial music that you're hearing in this film. And, you know, weirdly, we talk about these films that, like, are kind of these big leaps forwards in a progressive sense. Like, being progressive in a weird way is not noticed at the time. And but one of the other things is that, like, that movie, all of the music just feels like noise. Like, everything in the background of the 94 Crow feels like noise in order to better emulate the fact that you are in fucking Detroit, Michigan. Where this film, the 2024 Crow, it's all like when music starts, it almost feels like a different film. The moment that like sticks with me is when they're driving out to that quarry for their like lake party with their friends to show that like they're not just in love with each other. They're not obsessed with each other. They have lives outside of their love, which in a really nice way strengthens how much they love each other. I dig that a lot. But like it's that blue sky pan down to the like the truck they're driving in, and it's just like, am I still watching The Crow? Like, did something happen? Because this, like, the music is so front and center. It's so clear. It's mixed so different compared to how the dialogue scenes are going. Like, there's a heavier influence on, emphasis on the music in this particular film. Like, which I also kind of dig as guys who like are sitting in our home studios recording the podcast that we do for fun, that like, he never really considered himself a musician. And then when we see his house, he's got like his little studio of like, I got the MIDI keyboard and then I got the sound effect keyboard up above. I got GarageBand open. Here's your microphone if you just want to sing along. Let's just see what we can do, Chalet. Why don't you play the piano?
But that was probably the last big thing for me, was that like I just wanted to make sure we nodded to the soundtrack for sure, because it was so good.
Yeah. Overall, I really enjoyed this film. And I know that you and I on this show, we make a habit of like trying to find something to enjoy in any situation, scenario, and experience we subject ourselves to. Honestly, I thought, based on everything I heard, and I never really allow myself to be like, I was not gonna watch this film because of this like feeling in the water of like The Crow 2024 is a bad movie. That's never going to sway whether or not I watch a film. If this movie were 3.5 hours long, that would have been like, I don't know if I need to watch a 3.5 hour Crow movie. Like an hour 50, and really it's an hour 40 because it's 9 minutes of credits. Like I was on board for that. But like, Danny Houston, he was in a Horizon and American Saga Part 1. And I was so excited to watch that movie until I sat down, started it, and saw it was 3.5 hours long. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not interested in this. And I will admit that, right? I don't doubt that someday I'll watch it, but that moment where I was going to do it, I was going to pay to rent it from Amazon. And now it's available on Max. So if I do want to give 3 hours to that movie, if I can find 3 uninterrupted hours to give to that movie, which is actually more of a thing, cohabitating in my residence with other people, right? Like finding 2 hours to dedicate to The Crow today was not difficult. Finding 4 hours to dedicate to something is difficult. The only way I got through Justice League, the Snyder Cut, was because like everybody was out of the house. And I'm like, all right, they're going to be home in 4 hours. If I don't start it right now, I will not finish the movie. And that still flew by and I enjoyed my time with it. But like, I knew that it was 4 hours that I had to find where I could watch and not be interrupted. Right? Like, because I'm watching these films, like that's the last thing I want to talk about this film, is I thought there might be some interest from my father to watch this movie. And he's like, no, I don't fucking like horror movies. It's going to be scary. And I'm like, why do you think it's going to be scary? And then watching the movie, I'm like, this is no worse than what you watch in like Chicago PD. And that goes out over the airwaves. Like anyone could watch that movie. That show, right? Like, there's nothing scary. Like, I don't think, like, even though horror is, like, the 4th genre assigned to this film on IMDb, I'd really like to read that little thing off, if I can find it. I
mean, I do think, again, we talked about this with the 94 one, but I do think there is something to this aspect of, like, the vengeful spirit coming back and murdering all of these people that, like, told in a different way, that he would be the serial killer in like, I know what you did last summer, right? Like, this is like,
right.
But there is definitely a horror stint to this for sure.
But if we're going to look at genre tags in a similar way to we look at the ingredients in our foods, where like they are listed by how much is in there, this is action, crime, fantasy, horror, romance, thriller. And horror being like the 4th ingredient in this movie, I support that. Because like, yeah, like the idea of this person being able to whisper a few words in your ear and you essentially being brainwashed by your darkest thoughts and like desires, that's scary. Like there's the lack of agency that represents and the power that represents for Danny Houston's character is terrifying, right? But that's like cerebral horror. Like the horror that he's talking about is the horror you're talking about of like, it's Jason Voorhees. It's I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. It is this spirit that is brought back from the dead in order to enact revenge. The only difference is that like we see that this one is justified. Right? And like, and I think that's a weird thing that they've done with like Michael Myers in modern stuff is like the fact that that psychologist was essentially abusing him. So him wanting to come back and get revenge on that guy, I mean, like, I kind of get it, right?
Yeah, no, it's there's a weird like. There's a weird sensibility to The Crow that like asks us to be on board with the killer and their vengeance, and it's not the only series or movie that does it. But I think that by adding like a costume feature to it, adding the gore stuff to it, like they just add so many layers to it that bring it so much closer closer and closer to that genre that I could get behind your dad being like, no thanks.
Right. But then I think like, and it's also, but like that was
I don't want to dream of Bill Skarsgård for another reason. I already got nightmares still from it.
I mean, the dreams I'm going to have about Bill Skarsgård are probably going to be related to like questioning my sexuality. Eric is pretty in this movie.
I think that's the other thing that I would like to point out. It's just that I think that Bill Skarsgård, I'm gonna label this right now. I think he's got a Paul Bettany problem.
Okay, interesting.
He shows up and people are just like, man, I love this guy. I always love it when this guy shows up. But then he does his own projects and then people don't make the effort to go see it. And I don't know what it is, right? I think about like Priest or Legion, like those Paul Bettany led like action movies he tried to do in the mid 2000s that never really went anywhere. And I feel like there's this hump that Skarsgård just has to get over, and people will really be on board with going to see more of his stuff. But like people talk about him, they love him. They're always talking about how wild it is when he does what he does, and then like nobody wants to because the other big movie that he had come out this year, or might have been the end of last year, was Boy Kills World, right? And that's another one that went nowhere.
Yeah, that was he has another one this year too. Boys Kills World was last year because they talk about how the fact that like this was his second movie that was essentially a failure this year. And I'm like, really? I didn't realize he had a Nosferatu, the remake of Nosferatu. Oh, that's right. That comes out on Christmas of this year.
But that's the Eggers one, right?
Yeah. That's Rob Eggers, and he's
because there was like another Nosferatu that also came out because that one hit. But if I couldn't remember if he was in the Eggers one or not. Man, yeah, that one. I mean, but see, I think that there's enough other people involved with that movie, and it's got its own kind of thing going on. It's like talking about like It. Like people didn't go see It because of Skarsgård. They might have gone to see the second one for him, but like that first one, he was such a delightful surprise. People were actually very nervous about like how's he going to be as Pennywise compared to everybody's Tim Curry, right? Yeah. But then they saw that first one and they were like, oh man, this dude's fucking awesome. And then the second one was just as popular. So like I feel like he's in that vein where like it's not that he's a disappointment. People love seeing him on screen. But the second that you put his name at the top of the bill, nobody's making that effort to put their butt in a seat. And that's the same problem that when I was growing up, I constantly found myself like being the only one being like, Paul Bettany's doing another movie. Let's go see that. And everybody was like, who? And then we would go see something and they'd be like, I love this guy. Who is this guy? And I'm like, that's Paul Bettany.
God, remember Paul Bettany in A Knight's Tale? I love him.
Yeah.
I love him as Chaucer. It is like, but again, it's right up that same alley of like, man, he's so good in this movie. And people are like, who is that? And I'm like, it's Paul Bettany. What are you talking about? But
ask them to go and see fucking Priest and like, no interest.
One wants to go see that. Yeah. But I guess like where I think about Nosferatu is the fact like he's playing Count Orlok, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's the star of that. But then looking at the cast, he's only third billed behind Emma Corrin and Aaron Taylor Johnson. So you're right.
Because they're doing Nosferatu, much like the Dracula story, there's people that encounter Nosferatu that I'm sure more people would consider to be the main characters of that story. But I see what you mean. He's the titular character for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not the titular character because it's not called Orlok. But yeah, and Boy Kills World was at the end of last year. But he was also excellent in John Wick Chapter 4. right? You talk about that. He was great as, God, I freaking love Bill Skarsgård. I should not have looked up his IMDb page during this recording, because now I just feel like I have not given him any support. But he was great in this movie. I love his Eric. And the last thing I'll say in terms of they are resurrected Eric and Shelley from the first film, is the fact that the descriptor from the studio is soulmates Eric and Shelley are brutally murdered. Their souls are what find each other again. And you want to add at the end of it that whole speech about, I know our souls will find each other again, right? If they were going to do a sequel to this movie, which, like, that's what that final soliloquy is supposed to be, like, it can't be the same Shelley, right? Like, how could he return? Like, it's like they kind of closed the door on him being able to come back as Eric because of what he gave up, right? It'd have to be like hell has opened, and then he like kind of just slips through the open doorway to try to be with her again. But then he becomes not this like noble spirit of vengeance and redemption and retribution. He becomes like a fucking criminal. And it's hard to root for that sort of thing, right? He doesn't have Sarah to save the cat.
I think that if they do, I think that first of all, we're talking nonsense because
there's never going to be a sequel.
We're never going to see a sequel. But like, what I would have thought, where I would have expected them to go, is him coming back, but there being some idea of like he comes back more crow than man, I guess would be the best way to put it, right? And like that, and the struggle of the second movie is him coming, like losing himself to that vengeance, right? Like this one, he never gets that chance, and it's never complicated in any way because again, this movie doesn't want to explore things that deeply. But again, as we've pointed out many times, that's just the crow, baby. But I think that if you do a sequel and you bring a crow back, which they've never done before, other than the TV show, I guess. But if you do the sequel and you bring back Eric to be the crow again, like you have to explore how this thing that he has become is probably going to be the thing that like takes over whenever he comes back. He's going to be more monster than man when he returns, right?
I think he'd be like the Winter Soldier, and not just because his eye makeup sort of looks like the Winter Soldier's, but I think it would be the situation where like Kronos would need, like, we need someone to balance the scales again. We're going to send you to the other side so that you can fix this, you know, cosmic wrong that has been committed and make the people who are supposed to have like paid for it meet their ultimate end. So then he's out there as just the spirit of vengeance, and he runs into Shelley. And then like she recognizes him because it's fucking Eric, right? The love of her life, but he's not there. He's not there anymore. But then seeing her, it like awakens that part of him, and now suddenly he's got fucking Kronos and them like, this is not why we sent you back here. But it's not like he sought her out, right? It is just the nature of their souls constantly searching for one another that brought them back together while they were on the same plane of existence.
Are you just going to do another 2 hours on a movie that doesn't exist?
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah. My favorite part though is that it all takes place at a summer camp, and he spends 15 minutes helping the kid with his popsicle stick house, and he builds it all up after he accidentally destroys it, and then he kills somebody by shoving a popsicle stick down their throat. I think that was enough of a callback, right? That felt good. I liked this movie a lot. I wasn't expecting it, and now I am even more excited for watching all of the other Crow stuff that exists in the world. The 3 sequels, and I really want to watch the show, even though Reddit is so mean to the show.
Reddit's mean to everything.
Yeah, Reddit's mean to everything. That's my favorite thing is like he's like I'm trying to find a place to watch the series, and the highest rated response is, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, don't.
So, and then someone's like, actually, it's pretty high rated. I could understand why if someone likes the Crow movies, they'd want more The Crow. Oh, Reddit, you are a monster. All right, so I guess the last thing I want to just say, because we didn't bring it up, I love that he finishes the tattoo of Cry Now, Cry Later. And then, like, that's how we know that even though Kronos has rewound time, which is, like, kind of fucking baffling that he rewinds time and Shelley is not dead from the suffocation. She is saved in that moment. We then see Eric's hand with the rough, like, just kind of print version of that finished, which lets us know, oh no, that all just fucking happened. This was not a dream, right? I'm sure there are people on the internet who are fighting about, like, the whole movie never happened. It was just Shelley's dream as she was dying. And it's like, no, that's not what happens. There's plenty of evidence to show that everything happened. I mean, even to the fact that, like, I love that the EMT is not Kronos, but an actor who looks like Kronos. Being
is
like,
it not him?
It's not him because he is specifically credited as. I had to confirm it because Kronos is played by where is Kronos?
Sammy Booya. Right?
Sammy Booya.
Yeah.
Booya.
Probably
and
saying
then
his name right.
yeah, but and then Daniel Davies Selazan plays EMT2 Kronos lookalike. So, like, even that is, like, this thing of, like, oh, no, that's not really the Kronos character. It's someone who looks like him. But, like, for the audience, when he looks at it, he's like, you know, he fought like hell for you. It's like, oh, my God, did any of it really happen? Or was it just him fighting for her that, like, kept them from killing her, to the fact that when EMTs got that they could resurrect her? And then they show that little bit on the hand, and I'm like, no, it happened. And this is just, like, Kronos' human mask.
Oh, man, fucking wild.
It's just insane. They built, again, both of these movies just constructed such wonderful worlds, and I loved my time in them, right? Also, while, like, I love my time in, like, something like Hansel and Gretel, right? Or Cinderella. They're fables, they're fairy tales. Like, I wouldn't want to live in that world, but, like, movies are supposed to be a level of escapism. And the escapism on display in this film is something that I am all for. All right. Anything else, Siegen, before I jump into my spiel about the Discord and such?
No, spiel away.
I'm spieling, baby. You can call me Steven Spielberg.
Okay.
That didn't really work.
I regret that I kept this bit going.
Thank you so much for listening to this time capsule episode of the Say Report. These time capsule ones, we take the time to record them and set them aside so that you don't miss a Monday of entertainment from Siegen or I. That being said, this is out of space and time, so it was recorded on Thursday, October 17th. So if there have been ground shaking, like, movements in the world and you're like, it's weird that they're acting like those things hadn't happened, those things have not happened yet for us. That said, if listening to us talk about this single topic was fun, you can listen to normal episode of the Say Report. Again, they drop every Monday, and they are, you know, conservatively about everything. Any topic is on the table. And if you want to keep that conversation going, you should join us in our Discord. If you find us on the social media sites, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, you can find an invitation to join our Discord where you can have fun talking about all the stuff that we talk about, introducing topics, maybe a photo of me with Crow-esque makeup every now and then. Who knows? We'll show up there. But if that's too intimidating for you, you can always send an email to thesayreport@gmail.com. That's a good way to get an invitation if you're not on Facebook or Twitter. But also, we will correspond with you via email, right? And if you want it specifically to be for Siegen's eyes or my eyes, just make sure to include our name in the subject line. And our intern, who I assure you does not exist, will make sure to distribute it appropriately. That being said, thank you so much for joining us on this episode where we looked at The Crow from 2024. It's now time for William to bring us home. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.